Hello, hospitality folks. Welcome to Beyond the Bar. My name is Colin Lukasic. I am acquainted with
Aaron Burns. How's it going?
Howdy, howdy. We're going to be talking to you today, folks, about the hospitality industry. We are based in Nashville. I have 13 years experience in the hospitality industry, strictly in Nashville. 9 years of them on Broadway. I am the owner of Battle on the Beach, which is a bar versus bar volleyball tournament. But as silly as that sounds, it brings about 400 bars together, or 400 people together per day. And the idea is about community. So we're trying step by step to grow the community here in Nashville, Tennessee that is ever growing.
Absolutely. My name's Aaron Burns, about 10-year industry vet. Just recently got my MBA. I'm also an entrepreneur, really focused on some entrepreneurial opportunities in the hospitality industry, trying to connect people to better financial services.
Yeah. So at this point, Aaron, I think we're almost lifers in the industry.
I think so.
We've built our careers on them. I randomly built a volleyball tournament on them too. But we're gonna talk to you today about, well, I guess why you should listen to us for the next 10 episodes or so. Yeah. So we're gonna be ideally a data-driven podcast, and that means we're gonna try to find organization within the industry chaos. And hopefully bring some interesting things to light. And one of the inceptions for that was Nashville's very archaic when it comes to its laws, its tip procedure, its healthcare benefits. It's just behind the times. So we're gonna, I hate to use the word stir in the pot, but we're gonna see what happens. We're just gonna put the data out there and let everyone else interpret it. So
no, that's good. It's honestly a really good way to approach it, because when you talk about the way the service industry is in Nashville, it is like way far behind in certain ways.
It's crazy.
But to be fair, like when you talk about, we compare it to other states, there are so many issues, and it's really state by state. And I think that's what really makes it an interesting topic for everybody that's involved in the industry. Like there are so many inconsistencies that it's honestly like crazy to me.
And it varies too, whether you're, server, bartender, volume server. Craft cocktail guy, it's all different. And it's especially different in every other state. And especially different when it comes to one of our main topics for today?
Federal wage.
Federal wage. What is that federal wage, Aaron?
$2.13.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Aaron,
super low.
Aaron, how long has it been $2.13?
Long as I can remember. I've been in about 10 years, I think I said, but it's probably closer to 12 or 13 if I really get into it.
Yeah.
So, and it's the same in Maryland as it is in Tennessee. I think it might have changed like $1 in Maryland, but the fact of the matter still remains. Your hourly wage is insanely low in this industry.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's wild. So why is it insanely low? Why do companies get away with paying their staff $2.13 an hour?
I think if you really get into it historically, there are definitely some issues as far as how the tipping culture really came to be. But what I think is the most important thing is like where we are today, right? So you know how it is in Nashville. Like we generally speaking make pretty decent money off tips, but we're not guaranteed anything. Like we very much have to work for it.
Absolutely.
It's the one industry, and I think it's so crazy to me that like you can have so many other industries that have commission, right? We talk about like it could be roofing, or it could be like car sales, everything else. Commission's built into the price. And the crazy thing to me about bartending is that your commission is not built into the price. It's really up to the customer whether or not you're getting your commission. And it's the only industry that I can think of that has that sort of like issue built into it.
Structure, dynamic.
Yeah, it's crazy, yeah.
It is crazy to
You're
me
guaranteed
too.
nothing.
You're absolutely right. That's a good point. I like when you said that when we talked about this earlier. You're talking about commission. I think that's a good way to approach it too. Broadway is kind of an outlier here, but I'm going to use the example of, I don't want to bite the hand that feeds me. The hand that feeds me is the mass populace, right? I am essentially a glorified hobo.
Bachelorettes.
Yeah, that's right. In Nashville it is. I am essentially a glorified hobo.
We love you, Bachelorettes. Please do not take that.
Yeah, dang right we do. But I'm a glorified hobo, $2.13 an hour. And from my perspective of doing volume bartending for the last 9 years on Broadway, it's a hustle, and it almost breeds a toxic psychology that comes with that hustle. Now it's toxic not only to me trying to hustle people at $2.13 an hour,
right?
Because I am not deserving of a tip. It is gratuity for a reason. However, it's also toxic to the guest. So if someone doesn't come up or someone doesn't tip me 2 or 3 times in a row, I'll be like, hey man, make my living off tips. I shouldn't have to say that, and I know it's unprofessional as hell, but that's what we're dealing with. When you work on the average, if I had a guess, and we're gonna get some statistics later, some real raw data when we dive into this. If I had a guess on a Saturday night, if I'm on the hot well, I'm probably getting stiffed on tickets. Probably about 25% of the time.
Oh yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
So with that being said, you're still walking out with money after 500 transactions.
Right.
And there's a piece of my soul that comes 25% of the time when
you've been in the industry 13 years and you still have a soul.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Doing volume bartending, I lost that within 2 years. It changed me.
You kind of have to.
But it to me, it just breeds this like toxic psychology between. You have an anonymity. You're not as hospitable as you want to be. You're almost battling a guest instead of.
Okay, so you mean between you and the guest?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel that. I really do, because I feel like there's a part of me as a bartender that's genuinely like happy to help people out. Right. If they're coming in from out of town, they're new to Nashville, they've never been. Like, it's fun to send them to the great places, like have that great guest interaction, just really like get into things, like have that great just discussion, you're vibing, you feel it. And then the feeling when you have that and that all happens and then you get the 5% tip.
Yeah.
That's so deflating. And it really just like, and agreed about the toxic thing. All of a sudden you're just like, oh, fuck this dude.
It definitely goes both ways.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And it's really, and I think that's why like with tip culture, the thing that really bothers me is there's such a disconnect between people who are in the industry and they understand like what is expected versus people who are not. And like, to be fair, there are some people who just really don't know with tips. Yeah. And I get that. And usually they're cool. Usually they're all right. And they tip you 5%. And like you get your 5% and it's okay. But like at the same time, just like where's this disconnect? You know, and that's the thing with tip culture that bothers me. I would prefer in some senses, like we talked about Miami earlier.
Yeah. Let's talk about, how autograd, all that. Let's talk about why the main discrepancy. Why do you think the main discrepancy in tips is happening right now? I would say, my argument is going to be you have Washington, you have California, you have New York.
Okay.
Which their minimum
higher
wage.
Hourly.
Their minimum wage is
Washington's 15, Oregon's I think 14, New York's 10.
New York's 10.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So you have these huge demographic of people in those 3 places, right?
Right.
But you have a big change, a big shift in the tipping culture because of that. Because the
higher hourly.
Because the higher hourly.
Okay.
I mean, look, straight up from even my perspective of making $2.13 an hour, if I go to a place and I know someone's making, it's almost like the barista conversation we were having.
Yeah, we did talk about.
We were having earlier, where you're getting them a pretty damn decent wage,
right?
Plus tips, and it's not from my incentive. Even as a bartender, I don't think I'd tip 20%. You know what I mean? I don't tip. Yeah. I think it would relatively go to like 10% or something like that.
I will say one of my toxic qualities as a bartender is if the tip option comes up, I feel physically incapable of not tipping.
Oh, that's 100%. I'm like, I'm not a douchebag.
It could be my like landlord. He'd be like, "Yeah, your rent's $1,500 and $300 tip," and I'd be like, "Okay."
Yeah, that's reasonable. I appreciate you, landlord. Thank you.
I wouldn't do that. But the point is just like, you get so used to working for tips that you feel like it's like customary, right? And then, tip proliferation is the thing, where industries that weren't typically tipped 5-10 years ago, all of a sudden you're starting to see it more.
Yeah.
All right, so this is a crazy little tidbit that I want to throw in there. So I went to a Ravens game in Baltimore and went to the stadium. And so they were doing beers at the stadium. So I got some beers and I went to tip. And actually the bartender, she says, "Don't tip." And I was like, "Don't tip." She goes, "The tips don't go to us. They go to the company."
No, what?
I swear to God, dude, I am not making that up. I was like, Are you fucking
That's
serious?
Insane.
I was heated. And I told her, I was just like, so I gave her cash. Yeah. But yeah, all the tips are actually, they go straight to the company that manages the concessions. So none of the employees are tipped. They're hourly.
And this is a good reason, a good example of why we're just trying to spread the good word. When it just the information word, when it comes to shit like that makes my blood boil. Like,
Yeah.
how is it vastly different from one state to another? From
To me,
one
it's
company
theft.
to another.
To me, that's theft.
100%. Gratuity is
Yeah.
gratuity. We can, go in the definition
it's a
of that word later.
voluntary gift in that sense. Like, you're gifting to the company, and these, they work hard.
Absolutely.
They work just as hard as a bartender at a normal bar.
But also, why do they work so hard? Because they're trying to get, ideally, the
commission, right?
commission.
Sales. That's
Right.
why that, to me, I love the commission sales structure.
Yeah.
If I'm being entirely honest, as a bartender, I wish that it was just automatic commission built into everything. Because like you and I, we're both volume bartenders.
Yeah.
So you're on a busy night, you can crush out a ton of volume. You can just fly, right? You're doing 10, 15 grand in sales on a register. I would I'm not saying 20% necessarily, but if there was 15% automatically built in, it's a pretty good night, right? Versus all the stiffs, there's so many. I'm usually walking out on a Saturday night with a 9% average. And I think we talked about this earlier too. I worked my ass off, dude.
Yeah.
I just want some money for it, Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I mean, that's why we're in this industry, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Among other things. We're not crazy about the long hours, getting off 5 a.m. after, no breaks on a, Clopins, God, those shouldn't exist.
Oh, Clopins,
no
God.
breaks on a 12-hour shift. And
it's rough.
We're going to get into the laws later in a different episode too of what those actually look like. But yeah, there's a lot of challenges in this industry. I think tipping, why we're here.
Yeah.
Is one of the main reasons. And the big shift in the tipping culture, like you said, you have your Subways,
right.
You have your Jimmy John's, you have your baristas and whatnot, and you buy a shirt and all of a sudden you're like, why am I tipping 20% on, why are they asking me to tip?
Or merch at
yeah.
shows.
So I get wholeheartedly where a lot of people are sick of tipping culture.
Right.
And I mean, eventually something's going to come to a head. I think between the drastic differences of tips in different states, of minimum wage laws, versus the people are just so fucking tired of tipping.
Go on. I have a thought when you finish.
That was it.
Fire away. All right. I'm just talking about, all right. So that some states have this rule where if you don't make enough in tips to constitute minimum wage, they have to pay you minimum wage.
Yeah.
Tennessee is the only one that doesn't have that. It doesn't. You're not entitled to shit.
Tennessee is, again, so archaic, which is ironic because we have, outside of Vegas, and probably Vegas and Miami, we have some of the biggest bars in the nation. There's
insane. The volume we do?
Absolutely. There's
crazy, dude.
And we're going to rattle off a few numbers here, and I'm going to keep these. I'm not going to say any names of these
Shall
places.
we call it the place that we have worked together before that I no longer work at, but I know what you're talking about?
$29 million a year last year.
Yeah.
You have another one in the same company, $39 million. You have another one.
Is that revenue or profit?
Revenue.
Yeah,
so within this one conglomerate, actually, there's two main conglomerates on the street that are making plus $100 million.
Right.
Right. Every one of them pay their staff, front of house, $213 an hour. It's wild, right?
Talk about the biggest scam.
Absolutely. That's why they keep building them.
And I can't blame them.
Because
legally speaking,
that's capitalism, baby.
They're doing what they gotta do.
Exactly. And they're covering their bases.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But those bases needed at a certain point.
Yeah.
You are just taking advantage. And again, I say that I don't mean to bite the hand that feeds me, but the hand that feeds me are the people.
Right.
So there is
but that's the thing. There's 200 people who want your job, and it's that's what they use. That's the leverage because you can't argue with that.
Yep. And that breeds toxicity in its own right.
If I fuck up one time, I've got literally 200 resumes on the table to replace me.
Yeah. I've never felt like more of a cog in the wheel before, but man.
At Broadway?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
And you are. But the thing that drives me insane about the $213 an hour, there's so many issues that I hate about it. I get it. It makes sense. And we can talk about this later. I would prefer an automatic gratuity. And I think you had a different opinion on that. We can get into it. But the thing that drives me crazy about the $2.13 is when it comes to cuts. All right. Yeah. So you've got 10 people on the floor, right? As a server or a bartender, whatever. That 10 people is costing you $21 an hour. What's your incentive to cut anyone?
None.
None whatsoever.
No, if they make one drink, they just make their profit off you.
And that's what drives me crazy about it. You know, it's like, as a $2.13 employee, you have like no recourse.
Nope.
Like you really have no protections. There's no incentive for a company to cut you early because you don't cost them anything. And they're like, the whole point is, if you're gone, you know, if they want to find someone to replace you, they can. And it's no cost to them whatsoever. It's at will employment. So really, like, as a bartender, as a server, you have almost zero leverage.
Yep. And
that's like part of the issue.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is, you're working on pure commission and you have access to, you know, $30 million a year revenue, you know, that you're a part of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you got nights where you ring in 10 grand.
They give you the location to make money. The way I think about bartending is almost like we're independent contractors.
Right.
Ironically, not in the tax bracket of independent contracting, but we get to use it's like almost like renting a WeGo space.
Right.
You're independent contractor at this location under their house. You know what I mean? So, especially in volume.
Oh God, I know.
That's the dichotomy there. But yeah, I think these conversations are good to have. I'd love to get to talking about the autograt.
We should.
And I am completely against autograt.
Interesting. Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
I say that, and you know, we're averaging. I think, and this is not raw data. I think the company I currently bartend at says we average about 17% tip.
Okay.
On our checks.
Is it 17%?
Yeah, that shocked me too, because I put a lot more on a drawer on Friday and Saturday night. I think the Friday and Saturday nights honestly skew the data so much because
that's fair.
Again, you get 25% of the stiffs on a Friday and Saturday night, amateur hour.
And to clarify, for people who might not know, so like the company that we're talking about in theory, that we will not mention any names, has a concept that has a restaurant floor. And it has a couple of high volume floors. High volume, typically lower percentage, right? High touch, like the high touch floor with dining, usually around 20%. So I think that what happens a lot of times, especially with the high volume portions, is you're getting just a huge amount of stiffs, but you're also getting really good tips too. So it's like,
it always balances out.
It's complicated. It's unnecessarily complicated. it's like so unnecessary.
Again, we're driving through chaos.
Which I think leads us into the commission talk that we're talking. All right. So you say you're against it. I will say I'm partially for it with a few stipulations. So you go ahead, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Well, if my thoughts are, you can't, gratuity is service-based, right? Like you have that small personal touch with a guest, even in volume, if you can, like if you have time for it, whatever. If it's realistic, if it's realistic, if it's not, you're just making drinks. It is what it is. Gratuity to me is service based. So if you're a dick bartender, and there's plenty of dick bartenders out there,
stories about that too.
Yeah, if you're just an entitled asshole bartender that's so jaded and you hate people,
right?
A, you probably shouldn't be bartending, and then B, like if you're gonna be an asshole, I'm probably not gonna tip you.
Yeah,
I mean, this is bartender me. I'm still gonna tip you, but I'm like, you're a fucking asshole.
Right.
Now, if you go to someone that's never been in the service industry before, and you're a complete dick to them, and like you're not patient with their questions, and you just cut them off because A, you make $2.13 an hour, and you're trying to take care of 10 other people, and you know this person is in a sea of, they're losing your efficiency and money per hour, right?
Right. Yeah.
By you taking time with them, and then you give them shit service, and then you essentially force money out of their bank account because of that service. I think to me that's totally unethical. Now you have places. What? I'm gonna elaborate on that one.
Like Miami's got the auto grad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll get into that in just a sec. But then you have these and I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, let's talk about Miami.
All right. So with Miami, I've been there a few times, and I will agree that when you have the autograt, service can definitely suffer because you're expecting it, right?
Great point.
So my whole thing is, if you're going to do it, like as a management company or as a director or whatever you are in that position with your people, you've got to be way more on top of it than you have to be when you have just pure tipped employees, because like you're not experiencing that same, there's no incentive, right? Like, what's my incentive to serve you better than somebody else, if I'm just automatically getting money? And my whole thing is like, and I don't know, call me whatever, but like, I've always felt like if I'm behind a bar, I'm going to try to give you the best service I can, but I am not everyone. I'm definitely not everyone.
Absolutely.
I'm not entitled to it. I know that. And I think that's the good thing about tips. But I will say with the commission, the thing that I like is I feel like it's, the Stanford prison experiment.
Yeah.
We were talking about this. Yeah.
I love this illusion.
So for those who don't know what the Stanford prison experiment is, it's one of the craziest like studies in human behavior, and I fucking love it. But basically what happened was they did this experiment where they had guards and prisoners, right? And these were people who volunteered for the study. They were not, there was no actual power involved, right? So they had guards and they were studying how these people were interacting. So the guards, they found within like a few days, not even like weeks, just started having these feelings of like they owned these people.
Yeah. And then
they
again, these are all acting. They're acting as
acting.
guards, and the people are
They
acting
had
as
to
prisoners.
stop the experiment because it got so insane.
Unethical.
All right, so here's my theory with the whole tipping culture. I think most people who come into bars are awesome, for the most part.
Yep.
Every now and then you get these people who have this like, it's like a power trip. And it's the same as the prison experiment, right? You feel like you're dictating someone's wage. So they get these like power trips. So this is why I like the commission idea, because I feel like there are people that come in who think, you might think you're entitled to the money as a bartender because you get automatic commission, but there's also people who come in as customers who think they're entitled to be a dictator.
Yeah.
Like within the entire service, like interaction.
Absolutely.
And to me, I'm just like, the commission's kind of a nice way to counteract that. But what I would say is if you're going to do commission, you're going to have to be on top of your people and make sure they're providing great service. Because otherwise, yeah, it is kind of theft in that sense too. And that's like the tricky thing about tip culture to me. It's such a balance, and it's such a weird like study in human behavior as far as like, what do you think you're owed?
Yep.
Versus like, what do you think you're paying my wage? It's so weird.
Yeah. And there's a law of averages in this.
Yeah.
And the company I work for is really good at digging into the law of averages and finding out.
What company do you work for? I'm just
kidding. They're really good at finding out the law of averages. And they say, hey, it's one of the most non-toxic places just because they're data-driven on this end. They say, hey, you've had a good shift here. Here's a good shift per week.
Right.
Here's a really good shift per week, and then here's a couple shit ones. But it always levels out to about an average a week, and which is ironically that you can take the
money. Yeah.
No. Oh, it's great money and the flexibility. I love bartending, but you can. There's, following those law of averages. It's fascinating with such a ambiguous industry that you can have laws of averages. Yeah. You can say that same asshole. There's a dime a dozen, but also there's X amount of people to make up for it. It is a great science in human nature.
There's the whale. There's always a whale.
Yeah, the sweet whale. Oh, the sweet whale.
And like it's such a weird thing to me, and it's kind of hard to define, right? Like with tipping culture, because you get those people that come in and tip you $1,000 for no reason whatsoever. Like
I feel targeted, but
no, I had one of those too. The whole point being just like for no reason whatsoever, you get someone who comes in who just likes you and then give you $1,000.
We like
Where
them too.
else in the world do you get that?
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
Super weird. Yeah.
What a weird industry, and we're still in it.
Yeah.
It's still thriving and still trying to create community here. So.
Well, yeah, and I think that's like, so yeah, we were just talking about the Stanford prison experiment, right? So like, I want to kind of go into serving versus bartending.
Yeah.
Because we talked about that too.
Yeah.
So the dynamic and how it shifts. So I will say from my personal experience, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this too. As a server, I get treated way worse than I do as a bartender.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why is that?
That was because you're going to the people instead of them coming up to you.
And how crazy is that? That's something that's so like not significant. It's so subtle.
Changes the whole dynamic.
It literally changes the entire dynamic.
I've
never gotten tipped worse than I have from tables at the bar. I feel like I'm a king. You know what I mean? Because it's just like I control the alcohol. But I think what it is you have like this little bit of power behind a bar that you don't have as a server. And like I love servers because I know so many who are awesome servers, and I will never go back to serving ever,
Never.
because I have zero control over anything. But behind a bar, I can say, okay, your food's taking a little long. Let me grab you a drink.
Yep.
Right? This beer's on me. I got you.
Yep.
And I've just noticed throughout my entire time in the industry that as a bartender, I'm always so much more respected than I am when I go like to a table.
Absolutely.
Wild.
Yep. I remember that. There was a big psychological shift in my whole demeanor.
Yeah.
I thought I was the shit when I first became a bartender. And
Yeah.
it's great.
Did you look down on servers?
I still do.
Oh.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry to all the servers out there. No, we love you.
Yeah, I love you. We make the industry go around. And, there's different places that, servers make much more of a killing. And then
like fine dining?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then
I can't
straight
hang with
after.
those.
No,
fuck
absolutely not. And
Yeah.
and they're straight after the money aspect and
Right.
thriving. Ignorance is bliss mentality, and
Absolutely.
they don't have the thoughts that we have on this. Right.
Mm.
We aspire to be bartenders because in the volume position, it's much more admirable. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And way more money. But it's an interesting psychological conundrum. But
I think,
that varies place to place.
Well, I think it's so interesting because it's like we talked about with the prison experiment, right? You just shift the dynamic a little bit, and all of a sudden it's a whole different experience.
Mm.
And all right, so to kind of tie it into the commission thing, the reason I like commission is because I think that it almost legitimizes what you're doing for people. Because this is so weird, and I'm on a lot of Facebook groups for bartenders. I'm sure you are as well.
Mm.
Facebook, Instagram, whatever. And one thing I always see, you get trolls who come in, they want to talk about why they don't tip and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's always the outliers.
Right. So what I always see is your employer should pay you a living wage. Every fucking time I see that comment, I'm just like, okay,
that's fair.
I see your argument a little bit,
yeah.
But every other sales position in the economy in the world has commission built in. Ours is the only one where the customer gets to decide whether or not they pay that, which to me is fucking wild.
Absolutely.
It's wild.
But we're still in it.
Yeah.
but it is wild. No, you're absolutely right on that front, man. And again, these are conversations that I like to have, and it's probably the hottest topic out of anything that we're going to talk about.
Agreed. Yeah.
And actually, let's get into some of the stuff we're going to talk about. This is our first episode. We're introducing ourselves to the world right here.
Most definitely.
But we also are going to cover, I call them the big six.
Right.
So we're going to talk about the laws, bartenders and you, the laws. What are your rights? What does a break look like? Are breaks legal?
Did you sign away yours too? I certainly did.
Did we sign a waiver?
Yeah, you had to. You had to sign a waiver. I said you would
we
not
signed
take
a lot
your
that I
30-minute
was
break.
not privy to. It's like agreeing that terms and acknowledgments to
the
an
Apple
iPhone.
agreement?
Yeah. You're like, take it away. There's a South Park episode in there somewhere.
Oh yeah.
But gonna talk about breaks. Gonna talk about laws for tipping out barbacks, hostesses, back of the house, what that looks like, based on Tennessee.
Oh, that's a good one.
Ideally, my dream is to hopefully the acknowledgement from a service industry lawyer here in town,
right?
And then ask the tough questions. Hey, one of the biggest ones that actually peeved me, and this happens. I want to keep this one ambiguous too. All over Broadway, all over Nashville, all over Tennessee, I'm sure. If you were to rent out a place, for the sake of numbers, we're going to use $10,000.
Okay.
If you were to rent out the rooftop of a building or whatever that looks like, an event space for $10,000, you are hit with a BEO. The customer's hit with a BEO that says 22% of this fee is a service charge. Now, apparently, it has to be legal, or else there wouldn't be so many places doing it. That 22% fee that someone pays off to doesn't actually go to the service charge. It doesn't actually go to gratuity. It goes to, a lot of it goes to the house, and a lot of these bartenders and servers that used to get paid $2.13 an hour now only get a flat rate of $20 to $25 an hour.
So you're telling me that a service charge as part of a contract does not go to the service.
Does not go to the service.
What?
A large majority of it can go to the house. A large majority can go to the commission of the sale.
Are you serious?
Absolutely. And it has to be legal in some sort of term. I think to my knowledge, as long as you use the word service charge instead of gratuity, it is now legal It's
No
at the very
way.
least, you're bamboozling the client. You know what I mean?
my
I'm getting
God.
bamboozled because I think that I'm renting out this place for
Yeah.
10 grand. 22% of this 10 grand is going to the 8 service staff, right? And then
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
want to do the math on that because I'm not good at it. But you think they're getting paid a fair, gratuitous wage for their service. However,
But it's not going to them at all.
they're
Oh
getting
my
reduced to
God.
hourly, and then apparently a lot of these places, like the iPhone agreement, we sign our life away to this.
That's crazy.
So I want to bring attention to stuff like that.
Okay. All right.
And there are a
As
lot
you
of places.
should. That's insane.
Absolutely, to me, it's heinous, right? There are a lot of places, especially on the street.
Well, it'd be one thing if you called it like a sales commission or something, but if you call it gratuity, I feel like
So
that's
they don't-
misleading to the customer.
they don't say gratuity; they say service charge, and that's the loophole,
Oh my
right?
God.
And again, Tennessee's
And how much are we talking? All right, so like, just throw me a ballpark number, like a contract. I don't know. What would it like to buy out a building? What would it cost?
let's say buy a whole building for 4 hours, whatever, a massive building on Broadway,
Mm-hmm.
100 grand, 800 people, whatever that looks like.
So 22% of $100 grand
Is
going not to the service
is not
staff.
going to the service staff.
Who's it
Now
going to?
that service staff, usually again
the company.
the company, the commission for the person who sold this contract,
Wow.
because that's highly negotiable, right? And we all know, like doing this for a while, that
Right.
you have huge companies that come in and they bat an eye to any kind of changes. Like they're like, or they won't bat an eye to any kind of change. Oh, we need to change the menu here. It's going to be 10 grand, last minute change.
Wow.
Here, take my money.
That's crazy to
So
me.
all that is, cherry on top for them.
Okay.
And of course, that's the way our society's set up, and
Right.
the house wants to always win. And that is what it is. At a certain point, you're taking advantage of the
Well,
ironic,
that's misleading.
gratuitous
That's
system
misleading. Yeah.
that you make so much money off of. So
Wow.
again, reasons I would really like to get a service industry lawyer in there. Ask them the questions. Why is that right? Okay.
I would love to know that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Because for me, like, all right, so I've been in the industry a long time too. I didn't realize that was something that was happening because I've worked in like hotels where that service charge has gone to bartenders.
Oh.
I've had events that I've worked with a hotel. I had a great experience there, so I'm not going to like talk shit about it.
Yeah.
But I worked with a hotel for a while, and we had some really big events, like for the Super Bowl when it was in Nashville. We had an event there, and I think our service charge was awesome. Like, it was a great night. I worked 4 hours and I made some great money, and it was awesome, And I was like, all right, and I feel like I was fairly compensated for my time, but that's crazy to me. So that's a loophole, basically.
Absolutely.
Wow.
It has to. I mean, again,
Well, and that's go ahead.
Nashville's so new and so up and coming, and there's been so much change and so much money that's come in the last 10 years.
Yeah, big
The
time.
laws have not been keeping up with that structure as far as the fairness of other places comparatively. So we're talking. This is a grass is greener kind of conversation we're having, right?
Yeah.
Oh well, poor me.
Because it could always be worse, right?
Right. Yeah, poor me. I'm not making enough money, and I'm trying
But
to.
you
bite
should
the
be
hand that
fairly
feeds me.
compensated. That's the point.
That's the main issue. You
Right.
know, and at the very least, again, you're bamboozling the client.
Right.
You're bamboozling
And that-
me, who I'm thinking I'm treating the
Right,
service
yeah.
staff right. You
Yeah.
know, so
Because to me, if it was me that was paying for that contract, I see the term service charge. I expect I'm being charged for service.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
So to me, if it's going to not service, I'd be upset
Absolutely.
because to me that feels like a really extraneous charge.
And you want to talk about commissions and stuff like that?
I do.
The person that set up the contract for the $100,000,
Ooh.
they're getting a percentage of that commission no matter what. Anything
Wait,
else,
they're
is
getting,
cherry
one
on top.
person's getting that.
Well, they're getting a percentage of that. They're ironically they're getting
Oh
the
my
commission,
goodness. Okay.
where
That's
the rest is
absurd.
getting the shaft.
Okay, so they're getting that commission. To me, this is what really frustrates me about like commissions or whatever it be, because I feel like we can agree on this. I think that the service industry in general, maybe not Nashville in particular, but I think over the country as a whole, there's so much ambiguity. Like there's so many things that happen. You want to call it behind closed doors, or just things that don't really make sense, or that it's hard to track money. We've talked about wage theft before. What drives me crazy is we make a lot of money, right? Like as bartenders, and it gets handled by a lot of people. So there's this disconnect.
Great point. Your money, your gratuity gets handled by other people that do not make gratuity.
And there was a case in Nashville, and we don't have to bring up any names, but I think we all know what we're talking about, where
Absolutely.
there was a significant amount of wage theft. where we're talking about money behind closed doors. People were not getting their tips. And the thing is, it's so hard to track. But I will say the company that we have both worked for, at least in my experience over the past few years, it was very transparent.
Yeah.
And I think that's really like an essential part of it. If you're going to be handling people's tips, people's money, there needs to be transparency. But there's so few safeguards and checks and balances in the industry. And I think that's really like, if I had to encapsulate one of my biggest issues with working in the service industry, it's that. There's no standard, there's no code. Everyone kind of does their own thing.
Yeah.
Which is
we thrive in chaos. So we're people that love that, right?
But at some point, like to a degree, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
How many times would you say, I'll put it this way. How much money do you think you've lost throughout your career due to wage theft or getting clocked out early?
Oh,
I was thinking about this earlier.
That's something I've never thought about, honestly. Getting clocked out early, like missing 10, 15 here or there, like, oh, you didn't have enough in the tip out in the bag. I have no way to tell.
Exactly. I thought about this earlier, and I really tried to like get into it, like get into the numbers, like add it up, how much I think I've lost money-wise. And there are so many ways to lose it, right? All right, so like for anyone who doesn't know with tip pooling, how that works, right? So you put all your tips in with a big group, and then it's handled by a manager typically who does all the hourly calculations to figure out which money goes where. Oftentimes that's done behind closed doors. There's no accountability whatsoever. Because there's no commission, because it's a lot of cash, there's no way to track all this, right? So I genuinely tried to put together, I was like, all right, I want to figure out how much money I've lost over the past 10, 15 years in the service industry. And I really tried hard. I was like, all right, say like I got shaved on my clock outs by like 15 minutes a shift at this job I worked for 3 years. Say this guy got tipped 16% versus 15% bar back or whatever. And I was adding it up, and I was like, I think there's a really good argument to be made that I might have lost like $10,000 to $15,000. That's a big deal.
Yep.
And there's zero way for me to track that.
I was gonna say tip tracking is you always have companies when you come in, they're like, track 100% of your tips. Yeah, how realistic is that? Especially if you're the one that's divvying up the money. How do I hold you accountable?
Right.
For this sake, we use Whiskey Row's example. They do a full house pull, right? So they're pretty good about cutting, shaving down the hourly on that. But all 4 floors are, if you were to close the second floor or the rooftop earlier, the hourly gets, obviously the hours are going to go up because there's less bartenders on that floor, whatever have you. Now all that money gets turned in blind drops, or straight up blind drops to the drawer to management, and they handle all that, right?
I got a big issue with blind drops.
And then you have the discussion of like, well, you're putting all this trust in whoever, and all those guys I know are great.
Right.
All the management that I know there. So I'm not putting anyone on blast, but I'm using Whiskey Row as an example of.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, how the fuck do you know?
Yeah.
So.
I mean, and that's the thing. There's just so much. It's so ambiguous, and it's so like it's hard to track it. It's hard to figure out where your money's going. And one of my problems with the whole industry is just it's the informality with which everyone approaches it. Especially like certain. In my experience, I've had good experiences, but I know so many people with ownership. Their money is approached so like nonchalantly.
Yeah,
it's like, dude, this is my living.
Yeah,
I pay my rent with this shit, and all of a sudden I've got to wonder where my money's going and where it's coming from, and I don't like that. I do not like it whatsoever. So I guess that's what I would say to support why I think commission would be good to an extent. It's just like, because you know what you're getting. And that's the thing.
Now on the opposite side of commission,
all right,
to get back to the bat versus autograph, right? On the opposite side of that, if you add commission, if the house adds commission per sale, and you're, like as a bartender, you're incentivized to upsell or whatever have you.
Right.
Not necessarily in volume because averages numbers.
Yeah.
However, the house, if they see it's almost like an entitled bartender. If you see that you've made so much money for X amount of time, and all of a sudden that money is now going to go down significantly because I'm putting a commission on something, or I'm putting out like stop
Yeah.
to this, right? You're losing, let's say for numbers' sake, you're losing 15% of your total sales.
Okay.
Because that's going to labor, right? And all of a sudden they're going to be like, well,
you would see
can't take that cut.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
and then if they did take that cut, drinks are going to go up 15%. And
Right.
which is ironic because
that's the thing. Yeah.
then they're not going to call
yeah.
it. They're not going to call it gratuity. They're just going to say, hey, these are our
The
drink
prices
prices,
are up.
and then no one's going to go there anymore because the drink prices.
And that's
are
the
up.
trick. It's kind of like that prisoner's dilemma thing, right? Like the only way it works is if everyone does it.
Yeah.
But the problem is not everyone's going to do it because capitalism says you got to charge the cheapest prices by volume, economies of scale, all that shit. So it's never going to work. It's a pipe dream. Like it's utopia. It's communism. You know what I'm saying? Like,
there is. That's fair. You know what? Someone brought this to my attention, and there's a bar, and I cannot reference it right now. It's actually in my notes somewhere. But there's a bar here in Nashville where the service staff gets paid a salary, and that salary is negotiable on when they get hired, and they make negotiable on when they get hired. So
that's interesting.
So I firsthand information, and I wish I could reference the name for you, and I would love to talk to these people.
We'll talk about this off camera.
Yeah, but they said this guy got approached, and he's a phenomenal bartender. We both know him, and he got approached, and he said, yeah, they said they offered me this number, and they was like, it's a little bit higher than our standard, but we think you're worth it, and you're gonna bring some people in. And I'm like, that's
we got salary and tips.
Yeah, and then apparently this is a place where no one freaking leaves. So you have what's sounding like a pretty non-toxic environment. Yeah. And it's built into obviously their structure because it's a brand new build for them. And it doesn't have the changes of tip structure or anything like that because it's built into their structure. And people go in as patrons knowing this. Yeah. I don't know how they know it. I think it's one of those places that are, oh, wow, the service staff.
I am so curious about this that I'm going to need to talk about it off camera ASAP.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah, I know. I wish I could.
But for sake of example, no, I get it.
But stuff like that apparently works for a lot of people. Now, if you approach you or I with that concept and you said, if I had a grit, we're not going to use numbers safe here. I really like the tip structure. Ironically like the tip structure of $2.13 an hour
too.
because of how gratuitous people can be, and I play those averages too. And I am blessed to work at a place where they value me as a volume bartender, and they kept me around for so long, and I have the flexibility as a bartender to do whatever have you. And I'm making.
It's been like 3 years, man.
Who's counting? And I'm making a.
Time flies.
Prospectively, relatively good money for what I do and how much time I put in per week, right?
Would you prefer approach salary though? I'm just curious.
If you would approach me with that salary and they said, hey, 4 or 5 days a week, maybe you get out by midnight, which sounds pretty nice actually.
So salary and tips though.
I would not do it.
You wouldn't?
I would.
Interesting.
I would gamble.
Okay.
Maybe this is me thriving in chaos. I would gamble my flexibility and efficiency of time versus money in the volume place where I'm at right now.
That's fair. Yeah.
For a way of life.
Yeah.
And not have to. I mean, this is one of the major reasons we are bartenders because we have the flexibility.
And honestly, dude, like you've got the personality for it.
The chaos.
And that's the thing. Like a lot of people don't realize is you are paid for your personality. Really are.
Definitely less in volume bartending because I've never felt less human. But
yeah.
As I go for my drink, that was ironic.
That slow and low.
We are. But again, I love the business and what I do, especially in volume. You want to get into craft cocktails versus volume bartenders and how we're doing the same thing.
Okay.
And there's some hatred towards both.
Okay, I've worked in both scenes. You've worked craft too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, here's my thing with craft. And for anyone watching, here's the whole deal with craft versus volume. Craft is 6 times the amount of work, occasionally the same money, but usually less. Yeah. That's my caveat. When I first got into bartending, it's actually crazy. The first reason I got into bartending to begin with was because I was trying to be like more outgoing, honestly, which is crazy, right? Yeah, because I worked in finance.
We cut from the same cloth, you and I.
So I worked in retirement with finance with T. Rowe Price straight out of college. And I was just like,
I totally would have guessed that.
Bored out of my fucking mind. And like, great company to work for, honestly. But I had friends who were making like 3 times what I made as bartenders. I was also just like kind of an introvert. And I didn't really want to be. And I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna try bartending. And I had a friend who was just like, bro, like it's gonna bring you out of your shell. You'll fucking love it, right? I do. I still do to this day. It was fucking awesome. Whole point being, like, I got super into craft because I was an artist too. So my undergrad was in classical piano as well as political science because I'm a weirdo. But
you do tickle those ivories pretty good.
I do what I do. But, I got into craft because I was like, man, it's fun, right? It's really creative. It's a really fascinating environment. I was making this cocktail, amazing bar program where we were doing a clarified milk punch, which is super weird, right? Like it was like a milk punch with whiskey and all sorts of different like herbs, and we were dropping in lemon zest to like clarify it and pull out the whey. Like
There's
it was
a market
like
for that.
science. Yeah, it was so cool. The problem was I was working my ass off, like 10, 12-hour shifts, getting my shit kicked in at the well, making these super incredibly like detailed cocktails. And honestly, I was just not making great money. Like if I had to compare craft cocktail to Broadway money, not even close. Yeah. Maybe 50%.
That's why we were on Broadway for so long.
Exactly, yeah. Like, do I love making Jack and Cokes? Not really. But I can travel a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly right. I think this is, I have a saying, and this is probably my alcoholism talking, but I always say, there's two different sides of the story, but I always say it's not the journey, it's the destination.
Fair.
But that is definitely my alcoholism talking. And also me bartending on Broadway for 9 years. Yeah. Jack and Cokes, slinging lemon drops, green teas.
Yeah, sling a ring. That's the mentality.
Sling a ring.
Yeah.
So, when I go, ironically, I bring up craft cocktail for bartending and why we're dichotomous in that. But ironically, when I go to a craft cocktail bar, I'm like, I don't give a shit what I should just give me something that tastes okay, I guess. I don't expect to get my mind blown. And
right.
But there's a market for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I think there's two different schools of thought when it comes to bartending. All right, so there is the craft cocktail school, which is very like, and you joked about it before, the mustache, like
targeted.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's longer mustaches, curly ones.
Oh yeah. And like I love that scene. It's a super cool scene. It's almost like you're reaching into a world. It's like a whole other thing versus volume bartending. And I feel like there's a real almost kind of animosity between craft cocktail bartenders and volume bartenders. And it's all like we're doing the same shit, just in different ways. But I do feel like there's a real like separation there. And I think you've noticed it with Battle on the Beach, right? Mm-hmm. Where it's harder to get the craft people out, but we get a lot of volume people out.
I was going to reference that. For the last 6 years I've been doing this, I've been trying to literally bridge the gap between Broadway, Midtown, and East Nashville bartenders.
Yeah.
And I have never, actually 100% never gotten a account from the East Side to join.
Not one?
No, and I literally try to tell them, like, hey, I'm trying to bring vampires to the light, and it's
I love the term vampires. We'll touch back on that later because I have another term for it and I love it. But yeah,
it's ironic too because I this is jaded, but I think of the Broadway bartenders as like pop star bartenders. I think of the Midtown bartenders as rock stars. Rockstar bar, maybe a little rock indie, whatever have you. And then I think East Nashville, obviously, well, it goes out saying
they're Bob Dylan.
They're folky as
like
fuck,
they're
man.
Fucking great, man.
Yeah,
like,
I love it.
They do their
and
own shit.
Dude, you're gonna see me at an East Nashville bar most of the time.
Yeah.
I
there's
blend in everything,
so many great bars over there. Like,
but
dude,
man,
everything Jimmy White does, love his shit.
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, I do too. Yeah. He's killing it. But it is so hard to get that type of bartender out and to extracurricular activities such as getting out in the sunlight.
What do you think that
was
like,
very
honestly,
biased.
do you think it's like just a difference of opinion about what constitutes bartending, or what?
I think it's a lifestyle. I think it's a culture, and what they can constitute as fun or not. I give a. This is gonna sound really fucked up, but it's
power through it, bro.
It's okay. It's not exactly like D1 athlete of bartenders. You know what I mean? On the East Side.
Yeah.
And big guys that like twirling their mustaches and stuff. I'm so biased in this. Cut this out. But
let's delve into this.
I'm so
I want to get
biased
into
on
it.
this. No, I love all those guys.
Yeah.
And they're probably not going to come out at 1:00 in the afternoon and play volleyball with the rest of Nashville. So
It's definitely
as much as I want them.
Yeah. No, it's I've definitely noticed that too. So being a guy that was like really into the classical music world, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of is. Like
Cultural divide, right?
I loved being a classical like piano player, jazz piano. It's the same exact thing. It's like they're so good at what they do that anything that's less than that or what's perceived as less than that is like,
Yeah.
very much so. And like I get it because like the work you're putting in, I appreciate it. The creativity, all that. I will say it's kind of a bummer. You know, when you're trying to like get people together, it's like, dude, we're all doing the same shit.
we're all doing the same shit
and
at the same rate.
At the end of the day, we all end up at fucking Mickey's or fucking Batter's Box doing shots of Fernet at 2:30 a.m.
See you there later.
We're all the same shit.
Yeah, nowadays, it's a lot of it's Mothers. Yeah, Mothers is a good job of bridging the gap between.
I love Mothers.
Two